The human experience, with our flaws, our passions, our triggers, our inspirations, and our imprints. If we could see behind everyone's story, then perhaps what we would have is deep compassion. In this podcast, I get the chance to explore these stories from some truly fascinating people in some honest and heartwarming conversations. And best of all, I get to share these discussions with you. I'm Lael Stone, and this is Humans Being. Welcome to Humans Being. I'm Lael Stone. It's such a pleasure to have you here. My humanness for this week has been all about dreaming, and not the dreaming I mean when you are sleeping at night and the warped dreams that you have, but the dreaming you do when you're just driving in the car, or perhaps when you're just sitting looking at a tree, or when you're a bit lost in thought. And I am a big fan of dreaming. I have always been a dreamer. That was written on my reports probably a lot as a kid. She dreams too much. Because I have loved thinking about what is possible and, where my imagination takes me. And for me, I think dreaming at this stage of my life has changed a lot. And what I've really been thinking about is, many years ago, my dreaming, or I guess I would have classified it manifestation, was all about how successful I could be, how much money I could make, writing a book, doing a big TED talk, all the things that I wanted to achieve. And a lot of them I absolutely have achieved, and I have seen that a lot of that dreaming has come to life. But what I was really thinking about this week is how our dreams and our visions change around what we want. And these days, my dreaming isn't about, I guess, the external achievements. It's about having a real stillness and, I guess, understanding of myself. It's also about having health, really good health. It's also about love and visioning, my life in the future with my kids and my husband. And the big dreams seem to have come back to a real grounded anchoredness, which I just kind of realized this week when I was thinking about, wow, I used to spend all my time writing my dream lists and making my manifestation board and all the things. And of course, there's still things I want and desire, but wow, it's really shifted into sitting in a different place at the moment. And, I'm a big fan of dreaming and a big fan of intention. I mean, I taught hypnobirthing. I taught calm birth, so hypnosis for birth for many years. So I absolutely know the power of our minds and what we can create. And I am a big fan of setting intentions. But my invitation to everybody who's listening this week is really about, where are you dreaming? And are your dreams all about actually what you want to create? Are they about desires and wants that we think are going to fill us up, or are they sitting in a place where it is helping you look towards the future and the future that you want to create? So many of us kind of look to the past and we look at what we haven't done, or we look at how we wish things had have been different. And of course, we can't change any of the past, but we can have an impact on our future. So my invitation for you all is to dream a little bit more and see what's possible. Now, my guest for this week, I think, will probably be one that is a bit of a dreamer. I'm just tipping that before I get into asking if he's a bit of a dreamer, but I'm thinking he may be. But my guest for this week is the very well-read Luke Bateman. Welcome, Luke. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Lael. And I love listening to that because I am a very big dreamer.
Awesome.
Dreams are very important.
I want to go into that. Before I do that, I'm going to just, read a little bit about your bio for people who may not know you. Here's a little snapshot of Luke. Luke grew up in Miles, Western Queensland, where rugby league was the dominant culture. He was signed by the Canberra Raiders, making his NRL debut in 2015, and he played 71 first-grade games before a chronic knee injury ended his career in 2019 at the age of 24. That's a pretty young age to retire from that, isn't it? That led to challenges with gambling and a whole life shake-up. And after leaving the game, Luke returned to Western Queensland working in forestry alongside his stepfather, and he began posting book reviews to TikTok in April 2025 under the account at Luke Reads, filming largely from a tractor, which is where I first saw you, and I was like, who is this dude talking about books in a tractor? And within weeks, he had amassed a significant following, and within months had signed a 2-book deal. And he now hosts his own podcast, In the Good Books. He's appeared on I'm a Celebrity Australia in early 2026, and he's writing his debut fantasy series due in 2027. I definitely want to talk about that. And this is what I love the most. He describes himself simply as a human being being trying to understand how to be better at being human. So welcome to Humans Being, because I think we're a match made in heaven here.
Yes.
I am all about understanding the human within. It's such a pleasure to have you here, Luke. Let's go back to the dreaming bit. Like, how has dreaming, how's that been in your life and in your journey?
Oh, dreaming is, essential to us as humans, I believe. So it's food for our soul, dreaming, and it's something that I've always done. I've always been a massive dreamer. And for me, it was, growing up with such a big imagination. And I wouldn't always say, when I say dreaming, it's not always about life dreaming. Like, I do a lot of just daydreaming. and, there's when we talk about dreams, there are so many different forms of dreams as well. And I've always been a massive daydreamer. I've always had this really vivid imagination. And my mum growing up, my mum would always, pained my mum to no end, because I always lived in what she would call La La Land.
Yeah.
So I was just always off with the fairies and daydreaming, and I was, fighting monsters and fighting massive battles, and had magic powers that I could shoot out of my fingertips. So I've always been a massive dreamer, and I've always been someone who's also had massive life dreams, and always really pursued my dreams within the world. And I think it really is, vitality for the soul.
It is, and it's creativity, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
I often think about it that it is. And we can all be creative in many different ways. Creativity doesn't mean just drawing or writing or painting or anything like that. There is creativity in so many things that we do. And it does break my heart a little bit when we're kids, where we are invited to be in that imagination, that play, that creativity. And then as we get a bit older, it seems to have been kind of knocked out of us a bit.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and especially in the world that we live in today, very capitalism-born world, creativity doesn't really have a big place in that world, and it's very productivity. It's very left hemisphere. It's executive thinking. It's making plans. It's doing things by the rules. It's adhering to a schedule. Things like that. We have suffocated ourselves so immensely with productivity and achievement and success, etc., that creativity has really been strangled out of our lives and strangled out of our us as humans and our souls. Yeah.
And we know that, I think, when we lose touch with our creativity and that imagination and dreaming, then it doesn't actually serve us at all, does it? It's such a vital part of being human. I'd love to start with talking about books. That's one of your loves. It's what people may know you about.
We can start there and stay there.
I would love to know, was reading something that was imprinted within you when you were little? Was that like a place where you went to escape? Like, where did this love of reading come from?
Yeah, so reading was always a part of my life. Has always been from the day I was born. Mum used to read. Mum talks about it. She would be, because I have a twin sister. So Mum would be breastfeeding me and my twin sister, and I have an older brother. And so while she would be breastfeeding me and my twin sister, she would be reading a book to my brother to sort of keep him occupied while she was breastfeeding. So I've had books read to me since I was literally, 1 week old. And then Mum was a single parent for a while, and we would have a ritual every night when we were little kids. We would all jump, me, my brother, my sister, all three of us kids would jump into bed with Mum, and we would have like bedtime stories, and Mum would read us a book before bed and in her bed. And that was our nightly ritual. So, and then once I was able to learn, when I went to school and learned to read myself, books and stories was just something I fell into, and it just paired so well. I'd always grown up around books, and my mum modeled reading around the home. My mum's a massive reader, so Mum was always reading. I always saw my mum reading. My mum was always reading to us or reading to herself. And then once I was able to read myself, and I think, pair that with my dreams and my imagination, it was just natural to me. Books was just what I did. Reading was what I did. And it was what I loved to share. It was how I connected with myself, connected with the world. And I say this all the time. I say, growing up, I always felt a little bit out of place within the real world. Whereas when I would read books, that's where I felt like I could breathe. That's where that anxiety, that low level anxiety would just release from me. and I would belong, and there was no fear, and books were always my safe harbour. So books were my safe harbour that I would go to whenever I needed refuge from whatever was happening in the world, and when I needed to escape, that was where I went. And they became a real source of, like belonging and a home for me. It was in books and in stories. And I have friends in books that I've been friends with for longer than my friends in real life, and I've got books on my shelf behind me that I've literally had since I was 7 years old. So books and reading were just, as you said, imprinted into my life from a young age, and they've always been the thing that I've been most passionate about. Not always outwardly. I've always, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well, but for a very long time, I was very shameful and secretive around my love of books. But they've always been that one thing that I've always returned to, no matter what, and the one passion of my life.
It's really beautiful to hear you reflect on that. And it makes me think about, and I'm sure this is the case for many children, when life sometimes felt hard. I mean, this is also true for adults, that reading a book, or as you say, kind of escaping into the book, becomes a soothing thing. It becomes this kind of not repression because it's a beautiful thing, but sometimes we go there and we can hide in it because it feels safer for us.
Reprieve.
Reprieve is a good word, isn't it? Yeah. Because I have seen that with parents I've worked with over the time. As children, we're all about surviving, we're all about protection, we're all about staying okay. And we find these different ways to meet our needs. For some people, that's being busy. For some, it could be sport. For some people, it can be eating. For some people, it could be gaming. And books can also be one where it's like, I need to check out a bit. And when you think about what books gave you as a child, because there's a lot of gifts, obviously, they gave you. When you reflect back on it, is there something that you see that you were just needing to turn away from that those books gave you? Was there just challenge? Was it just growing up, being a kid? Like, what was going on?
I think, there's so many things that books gave me. And one, it was that belonging, but it was also because I had such a vivid imagination and because I loved magic, I loved sci-fi, I loved fantasy. That was my source for all of that. They were my source for the validation of that within me, because that was never validated. That part of me, that nerdy, that magical, whimsical, soft part of me was never validated in the world. So books were always a place that gave me that validation. When you were reading stories about wizards and dragons and witches and all that kind of stuff, that was where that part of me got to come alive. And it's such a big part of me. It's such a big part of me. So I would spend my days just getting through so that I could get to the book at the end of the day where that part of me would be able to come alive. And it was always that. And as you said, and the other thing that it really gave me was great role models. Great behaviors, great values. There are people in books that have shaped my life. Characters in books have shaped my life, and there are always characters in books where, growing up, and this is probably unhealthy, but I was always like, I wish I could be them. I don't want to be Luke Bateman. I want to be this person. I want to be this character. I want to have these powers. That's the kind of person that I want to be when I grow up. And they are the behaviors and how they're loved and how they're looked up to and the wisdom that they have. That's what I want to be. Yeah.
And I wonder too, makes me think about how, what a gift that was for you to see that that's a possibility, even though it was in a book, because in the real world, we often don't have those role models. Perhaps we were not surrounded by great men who believed in, mystery and magic and were strong and powerful. Perhaps we weren't seeing any of that. And I totally understand that. I have experienced that too in certain books, reading about certain characters or about certain women going, that's what I want to embody. Like if I was to create a doppelganger of myself, right? But with all the qualities I want, like who would she be? What would she look like? And I've used that a lot actually over the years with people I've worked with. When we are trying to step out of the patterns and things that we carry and they don't serve us anymore, I often say to people, imagine who she is or what that person would look like. How would they respond? What would they do? You know, and I think that can be a really beautiful step towards helping us step out of what we believe to be true into the possibility of what can exist within all of us, because they're just stories we tell ourselves, right? That's often those stories we tell ourselves about who we should be or what it means to belong. And, you know, I love that for you, books were a whole other world of possibility that could exist.
Absolutely. And, you know, and I think that, you know, there's two things I want to touch on here is that when we are envisioning things in our mind, our brain cannot tell the difference between, you know, things that we're imagining and actually things that are happening. So when we're picturing these things, it is I would say it's like a practice ground or a training ground for situations for who you want to be. Like when you're envisioning these things, imagining these things, your brain is actually living through them. So it's a great practice ground for who you want to be and what you want to do in the real world. And the other part was it's a great way to access those stories and those behaviors and those values without shame. And, you know, this is you, and I've spoken about this publicly, you know, we live in such a shame-based society, and it's always about who you shouldn't be and not who you should be. And I think books give you a great way to access what you need to access, that growth, access that expansion without the shame that comes with a lot of what actually society does in the way, you know, the way that society teaches or polices us. So books are a great way to access all of that without the shame that comes with it in the real world.
Yeah, and I think then the next tricky step is learning how to embody that and be that in the real world. Because, I mean, I've heard you talk about just masculinity, and I've heard you mention that, you know, you hid your reading for a while, especially, was that through the kind of teenage, early adult years?
I think that was my entire life, to be fair. Yeah, that was my entire life. I was always very secretive about my reading. I remember when I was 12, and I was in Sydney I was playing for Queensland in the under 12 National Schoolboys Carnival in rugby league. And I remember I was down there with my parents, and my parents obviously always knew I read. I read at home. That was where I read. So my family knew and nobody else. And I remember before a game, I was sitting there reading my book, and then my parents were like, okay, Luke, come on, we've got to go to the game. You can read your book at the grounds. And I was like, no way. Like, I'm 12, and I was like, there's absolutely no way I'm taking my book to the grounds. And I had to leave my book at home. And I remember thinking to myself, like, all I want to do, like, I don't want to go and play footy. All I want to do is finish that book. And so my shame was always with books, and it was just the social shame, the fear that I had of being judged, of being ridiculed for being a book lover, for being a nerd, for loving reading, because it was never a part. And I think, and still to this day, male culture we have a very blokey male culture in Australia, and it's a very intellectual culture. And it was always seen, reading and books were always seen as a very feminine or womanly thing to do, a womanly undertaking. You know, men don't read, and men especially do not read fantasy. You know, so I was always very, very fearful of the ridicule that would come from men and boys around me if they knew that I was reading, if they saw me reading. You know, it was a piece of armor that I had to put on to protect me from that shame, and that was to hide my love of books.
And what changed that? What happened that made you go, you know what, that I'm not doing that anymore?
It was not overnight. I didn't wake up one morning and just say I'm done. You know, there was no light bulb moment. That came through years and years of really difficult internal work, really a lot of self-discovery, a lot of returning to myself. And that came through my journey through addiction, my journey through rehab, and my journey into recovery. And that was so integral in the confidence that I now have to really share my love of books and reading. So yeah, it wasn't I never woke up one morning and just said, you know what, I'm so happy to talk about books. I'm so confident to do that. That was years and years and years of really hard work and a really arduous journey of the self.
Yeah. And sometimes those journeys are really messy, aren't they?
Oh,
and
yeah.
they are not the journey we wish upon anyone, but often when we get to the other side, we can look back and go, that sucked, but I probably wouldn't change it because it's allowed me to come home to perhaps who I am now.
Yep.
And it was messy and I didn't like it, but they are usually those benchmarks, aren't they, where it's almost like they're a gift that help us, put down the masks and the armor and get real, really get real.
Yeah.
And when you think about, you've mentioned your addiction, is that mainly with gambling? Is that what was going on for you?
Yeah, well, gambling was gambling was a thing that really destroyed my life, which was like the debilitating thing that I could absolutely just had no power over whatsoever, that I was just, gambling was what I was powerless to. But at the same time, like I was abusing drugs and alcohol to use, as coping methods and to soothe and numb me from all the pain that I was experiencing, from gambling and from other things. So gambling was my addiction, but like, and make no mistake there, drugs and alcohol and substance abuse was there too.
Yeah, yeah. And they all kind of go hand in hand a lot, don't they? Because it is, as you say, it's the thing we turn to when we don't know how to deal with our feelings, when we haven't been taught to deal with our feelings, especially, as you say, this male who everyone's looking up to and you're playing football and everyone thinks you've got it all together and then there's a whole lot of other stuff going on. And we hear this story from many people who are athletes or they become famous singers or stuff like that. The pressure or the expectations that sometimes are put on us, or even just our own internal stories, when we don't have those skills or tools to know how to keep our feet on the ground and how to navigate those kind of things, it makes so much sense why we turn to other stuff to numb what's going on. And I would say that to some degree, we all do that. We all have these controls, numbing patterns that we do. And for some people, that's work, right? I mean, in our culture, we applaud that. We go, oh, look how busy you are. Well done. But we hide in work. It can be food. It can be drinking. It can be anything that makes us kind of numb from actually turning towards what's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when, now I think, going through all of that huge experience to get to where you are now, what do you do now? Like when stuff is big or when it's up, like what have you learned to do to navigate those tricky things?
Yeah. Great question. And many, many things, many answers to that. But I want to take, before you said when, you go through those journey, or we all go through the journey and we return home to ourselves. I think for me, it was, yes, returning home to myself, but it was creating home within myself. We have to create that home within. We have to create that belonging within ourselves. And it's always there, but, discovering it and taking off all the conditioning, taking off all the shame, the armor, the mask, everything, to rediscover that home within yourself and build that home within yourself. And for me, as I said, that was a journey. Still now, it's still ongoing, but that's been a journey of 6 years to this point. And I would say it's the home within myself is not a mansion yet. It's still basic, but that's what gives me the ability to feel those feelings and handle those emotions, and being able to know that I am safe. Being able to give myself the safety that I always sought from the outer world, from external things, being able to give myself that safety, myself that peace, myself that regulation is so, so incredibly important to us as human beings. And I think it's also knowing and changing our relationship with hardship, with struggle, with those big emotions. They are the beauty of life. They shouldn't be feared. Being able to feel big emotions is such a beautiful thing to do as a human being. Being able to sit with that emotion is such a beautiful, wonderful thing to be able to do and to be able to feel, at these oh, yeah, great love does not come without great grief. And these big hard emotions, they are really us experiencing humanity in its fullest. So changing, one, being able to create that home within yourself, to be able to feel all those things safely without having to turn to substances or coping mechanisms that are ultimately going to worsen our position in our lives. And then understanding and changing our relationship to understand that those big emotions are really beautiful. And it's something I love is there's no good or bad emotions. There are just emotions. There are no good or bad emotions. They're just emotions. There's nothing, whatever happens in the world, there's nothing that's good or bad. It is what we prescribe it to be, So changing our understanding, changing our relationships with what happens, and understanding that we don't have control over a lot of things. We only have control over our responses and our reactions. And that's how I really like to meet everything that comes to me and work through everything that I feel and everything that comes to me, be it external or internal.
You speak in my language, Luke, because I say all the time, there's no good or bad feelings. Like anger is just as valid as happiness and joy, and sadness has a place, just like excitement and passion. Our job is to learn how to feel them and express them in a healthy way and then let them go. Yet, I guess over 20 years of doing this work, what I've seen is so many of us have never been given the opportunity to express those feelings in a healthy way. And our parents, as well-meaning as they are, they were just doing what was done to them, and then we carry on that story. And it is, I say to many parents, when we are brave enough to turn towards and learn how to feel and create our own inner safety, as you're talking about, we then have a greater capacity to hold that for our children. And then when we can do that for our children, that is where we begin to change this narrative. And I think what I love so much about the place you are standing in and what you are expressing is you're an example of a man who's like, I'm going to lean in, and this is messy, and I also love these things, and I'm also just going to kind of blow open that whole idea of what masculinity is and this right or wrong, because you're right, there isn't that right or wrong. There's just humanness.
Human, yes.
Humanness,
yes,
that's
right? What it is. That's exactly what it is, yes. And to your point, that's what I say to many people. I say, all of your emotions are valid. But all of your responses are not.
Yes. Yes. And that's so true too, isn't it? Because really, I think we've come through some many generations where we've kind of been taught to shut everything down. We've been taught to suppress it all.
Through shame, that's that shame-based language, shame-based conditioning. That's that's something to feel shameful of, and then we start internalizing that shame. We start shaming ourselves for feeling that. But sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think we've come from that place, and what I witness now is we're at this time in history where we're like, actually feelings are kind of okay, and it's really important, and we're developing more emotional intelligence. But I think what you said there was really important. It's okay to have these feelings, but it's not okay to project them onto someone else, and it's not okay to go, here's all my stuff, I'm going to dump it on you. Our next step, I think, is as we're beginning to learn, hey, it's okay to feel, it's about also being responsible with our feelings. Like I often talk about, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit anyone. It's okay to be angry, and it's okay to, throw stuff that, we know is not going to hurt anyone. It's okay to rip up something. It's okay to shake your body. It's okay to make noise, but it is not okay to project that onto someone else. It's not okay to behave in ways, where we are harming other people, but those feelings are still really, really valid. And I think what I see is these next steps of learning how to process these feelings in a healthy way. We've reached a point where we go, okay, feelings are important, but I guess what I see sometimes in the parenting space is we're like, all right, well, my child's angry, they're allowed to be angry, but they're also not allowed to hit their younger brother, right? We need to help them learn healthy ways how to move that kind of stuff. And I think the more we talk about it, the more conversations we have around the healthy expression of feelings, the better off we're going to be.
No, I couldn't agree more. And as someone, I understand that so deeply, because I was someone who couldn't process my own emotions, who couldn't carry my own emotions. So I projected them onto other people. I gave them to other people. I said, this is now yours to carry. And it was, it was never theirs to carry. It was never their responsibility. And that caused a lot of pain for me. It caused a lot of pain for the people I was doing that to. It caused a lot of harm. Like there was, there was so much, I cause so much emotional harm to the people that and it's always the people that love us the most. It's always the people that care for us. It's not the strangers. It's not the random person down the street. It's the people who love us.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to learn these skills and to develop these skills and this ability to handle ourselves and process our own emotions, because it is the ones that we love and care for that will be the ones that don't, the ones that have to carry it if we don't.
Yeah. And I wonder for you, Luke, like what did that repair look like for you?
Yeah, great question. Really, really difficult. Really emotional, really sad, really, yeah, like, what is the word I'm looking for? It was just really hard. I think, really hard to confront, really hard to take ownership of, really hard to take ownership of the grief and the pain that I had caused the people who loved me.
Mm-hmm.
And the repair of that could only be done, and I had to help myself first. This is the same, we can't, while I wanted to be able to take all of that pain away from others, I really had to take it away from myself first. And this comes through, 12-step programs, which are rehab. Mm-hmm. Whereas, confronting myself, being able to sit with myself and say, these are all of my issues. This is all of what I'm feeling. These are all of the things that I have done wrong. These are all the lies I've told. This is every, like taking ownership of every single thing that I'd done wrong and all of the pain and harm that I'd caused, and then being able to being able to forgive myself for that. And then being able to approach other people with love, and being able to, forgiveness is difficult. Forgiveness is extremely difficult. I would say just ownership of that, responsibility of that with others. And a lot of the healing didn't come through the apology. A lot of the healing came through me actually bettering myself, me healing myself, when people were able to see me actually embodying what I'd said, when actions mirrored words. I think that really allowed a lot of that healing and forgiveness to take place from others, especially my family. My mother and my sister were two people who were really harmed during my addiction, and the amount of times I apologized to them was, countless. But once my actions mirrored what I said, that's when the apology and the forgiveness became real for them.
Yeah. Oh, I really thank you for your honesty and your tenderness in sharing that, because you are so right. The ownership is so hard. It is. We're just so conditioned to turn away from it, to blame someone else, to blame the situations. And being able to sit in that is one of the hardest things to do as a human. I hear you. It's really, really big. And fuck, it takes courage. It takes so much courage to go there and to strip yourself down, to be just like, I am here and I own what I have done. And for me, the most powerful piece of what you just said then is the ability to forgive ourselves, because we are good at beating ourselves up, aren't we?
Oh, and that's, once again, that's the shame. There was so much we speak to ourselves so shamefully, and we pour so much shame upon ourselves, and healing can't happen within shame. Healing does not happen within shame. And what you just said, I think into my recovery journey, once I started to become a lot better, I actually started to really pour a lot of resentment, a lot of anger, a lot of shame onto the addict.
Yeah.
So onto the part of me that was an addict, and I poured so much resentment and shame onto him. And a big piece of my recovery and a big piece of that forgiveness that we were talking about was actually, and I do lots of inner child work and parts work, and I'm sure you're aware of that. I do lots of parts work, and a big part of my journey was actually sitting down in a quiet place, and then sitting with the addict, sitting with the person who made those choices, who did all those horrible things and made all those mistakes, and sitting there and looking at him and saying, I love you, and you're welcome.
Yeah.
Like, you are welcome here. Instead of, once again, like resenting him and trying to carve him away from the whole.
Yeah.
He needed home. He needed a home too.
Yeah.
And that was a really big breakthrough for me. I think because once I allowed that and allowed forgiveness for him and gave him the love, and that's all he ever wanted. That's all he ever wanted. Even during his addiction, that was his pain. All he wanted was to be loved.
Mm. Yeah, and I often look at it this way: of that addict part of you is just trying to protect you.
Yes.
He was just like, this feels too big, so what do we do to numb?
Yeah.
Which we all have within us. I really do believe we all have these elements to different degrees within us. And, I love that internal family systems. I love those beautiful parts work. I work at the inner child a lot, because you're exactly right. What we need, or we deeply crave, is just that acknowledgement of, you are enough, and I love you, and you are not wrong. And it is through owning and welcoming and embracing those pieces that we actually then begin to, as you say, drop the shame. We know that actually, that we can stand in that place of learning to be a sovereign being, where we can be accountable, and we can come from a place of the truth of who we are. That is, I say to people, this is not easy stuff, right? It's it's messy work, and it takes time, as you're saying. It's such a process, isn't it, to do that? And I really loved, I just want to touch on, I love what you said about, it's in the evidence. Like, we can say sorry, and we can say, I'm sorry I did that, but it actually is in the evidence of our behaviour, where often a lot of the healing happens.
Yes.
And particularly with the people around us. And that's another really important part of navigating something like this.
Absolutely. And it's not only, like, and I always say this, it's always like, everything begins internally. And, when your behavior start matching your, behavior start matching your words, your actions start matching your words, that's not for other people. That's for you.
Yes.
That's so you can build trust within yourself. That's so you can say to yourself, if I say something, I know I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I trust myself. Yeah. And then once you trust yourself and you embody that, that's when other people, that's when, they witness it as well.
Yeah.
So it's, I think being externally motivated is really, it's really counterproductive. Trying to do things for other people. And as I said, there was many times in my addiction where I thought, I just need to get better so that I stop hurting my mum. But it really, I need to get better so I can stop hurting myself. And if I stop hurting myself, that will stop hurting my mum.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I am aware I have a lot of women who listen to my podcast, and a lot of parents, and not as much men in my audience. And I have found over the years that women, often because I think we're forced just through what life gives us, whether that's becoming a mother, it's being of service. Like, I think women are somehow invited a lot more into doing the personal, into, the deeper inner work, just because of, who we are. And men not so much, right? Because it's easier for them to kind of stay safe or, turn away from big stuff. And so often women will say to me, how do I get my partner to do the work? And I need my husband to come on board and all that kind of stuff. And it also makes sense, as you say, because so much of that is connected to, we don't feel, there is shame, all the stuff that we know that goes with it, around probably men turning more towards doing this kind of work. And I would love to hear what you've got to say. If there is a man who is listening to this and he has got those big stories and there is repair that is needed, or there's stuff that he has to own, what would you say to him as that first invitation to step forward?
It is a really difficult one. And I know as a man that there were so many times during my journey where people gave me, they offered me the wisdom or offered me the invitation. And I said, no. I said, I don't need that. I've got this. I don't need that. You can't help me. Like we as men, we're really prideful and we're really stubborn. And, that is, once again, how we're conditioned. And also the shame comes into this as well, because to accept that is to admit our own shame. And to accept that means that we would have to confront ourselves. And that's a really difficult thing for men to do, because while we continue to live as we are, we don't have to confront the shame and all the aching and the pain and the rejection and all the things that we've had to ignore internally. Like while we stay to our narrative and when we stay in our lanes, that, we don't have to confront any of that. And it's really, really difficult to confront that. The invitation, it really is so difficult because it's such a case-by-case basis. But the invitation that I offer even to my friends is through love. And love is so important to me. And I always say to people, I say this to my mates, I said, the love that we are capable of is on the other side of the things that we won't confront. And what we avoid stops us from reaching the level of love that we are capable of, and the level of feeling and connection with ourselves and with other people sits on the other side of the thing that we are resisting. And, and that's such a universal thing to say, but that is, I think that is the invitation that I offer to other men to become, as you say, become fully human. That sits on the other side of that. And it's hard because we've had, as men, because of patriarchy, we've always had, and when you talk about women being more open to that sort of thing, or it's a lot more women who have done that kind of work. I think that comes through, you've lived in such oppressive systems and oppressive societies that hardship is just something that was heaped upon you. Whereas as men, we had the wheels greased for us. So we didn't have to experience an hardship. Like we were guaranteed safety, success, abundance. The moment that we were born as men, that was guaranteed to us. That was never guaranteed to women. So you had to fight for that. And through that hardship and that fighting, that opened you up and that cracked you open to be able to experience humanity in its fullest and being more open to this sort of work and this kind of messaging. Whereas as men, we never had to experience that hardship, and it's made it really difficult for us to be open. We were never cracked open in the way that women were through hardship, I think, so that's my that's my views upon it.
I feel like there'll be a lot of women just applauding really loudly that you're actually even speaking those words, because I think women know it. Of course we know it. We live with it all the time. But actually, and I think what's missing, I saw something you did the other day where you were talking about where are the men actually speaking this as well, or the women, because I think they're often very silent. We know that a lot of bad stuff happens, and actually the next step is there's a lot of men saying this is not okay, how women are treated, and violence isn't okay, and abuse isn't okay, and we know that's not okay. But where is the next step where they're actually getting really vocal about it? And I think that that's where there's almost like I feel in my body like this, like, oh, thank God, that there's like women have been fighting for it forever, right? And yet when we hear that from a man, there's something that feels safe in that. There's a protective element that just is like, yes, thank you. Thank you for speaking that this is not okay. Like, yes, we can stand in a place where men might say, no, it's not all right, and I won't do that. But the next step is actually, I think, some action to be like, hey, what do we need to do to change what's going on here?
Yeah. And that's it. And it's not calling men out. It is calling men in.
Yes.
It's calling men in. But male silence, and this once again is so rooted in shame, because once again, while we stay silent, we don't have to confront the shame that lives within us. And I think my biggest my biggest sort of indicator of this, my biggest teacher of this was when I went through my addiction. I was surrounded, I was playing professional sport. I lived in male culture surrounded by hundreds and thousands of men my entire life, And when I went through hardship, when I was at the point of taking my own life, the people who came to my aid were not the men, not the people who label themselves as the protectors and the providers. That narrative is so debunked. The big, strong men in my life, the protectors and providers, they were nowhere to be seen. It was the women in my life. It was my mother. It was my sister. It was my friends the female friends who loved me and cared for me. They were the ones who showed up. They were the ones who came and said, like, we are going to help you. We are going to protect you, and we are going to make sure you get through this without taking your own life. And that just, reflecting upon that really made me see everything in such a different light. And then it also became so evident to me how silent the men were and how silent the men in my life were during that period. And I had to understand that for them to speak up, for them to not be silent, means that they would have had to own all of the things in their life that that would have been, I was holding up a mirror to them, and they would have had to confront that. Yeah. And they were preferred to stay in silence because silence kept them safe.
Yeah.
And now you see that all the time with everything that's happening in the world, and it frustrates me to no end. And as I said, I was one of those men. I was one of those men who said, not my problem, or I don't know any men like that. I've got no friends who would do anything like that. So, not my issue. That's somebody else's problem. But it is us staying silent that allows those cultures to persist and says to men who do those things that they are safe. They're not going to face any accountability or consequences for doing that because they know that all the other men are going to stay silent about it.
Yeah.
And it does, and then and my understanding then of the frustration and which becomes anger that women feel, that's when that's when that light bulb moment happened. I said, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
It makes sense why women are pissed.
Yeah.
It makes sense when you stand back and you look at it. And I mean, we've been just taught to be good our whole lives and all the things that go with that. I mean, I kind of stand with you. I don't like to go, you're wrong, you're right. I think we are all a product of our society, and I think we're all a product of our imprinting. And I have deep, deep compassion for men because as you are speaking and everything that you're saying, we are not taught as little boys to cry, to express your feelings, to be tender and vulnerable. It is all about stoicism and tough and strong. And so they're the messages that we're getting. It makes sense why they don't know how to lean into that place. And then when all those feelings are sitting there inside them and there's not a place for them to go, well, they come out in anger. Like, again, it makes complete sense why we are the way we are. Right. And I don't think it helps to blame, as you're saying, but I think it really invites the calling in is the peace, isn't it?
And that's the thing too, because you don't want to, to try and shame, then this be, no gender, like whatever gender, to try and shame someone into action. And there's a fantastic quote, and I can't remember who says, but shaming will never move people into action. It will only move them into acting.
Yes. I love that. Yes, so true.
And that's it. And you can't fix a shame problem with more shame.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real sort of disconnect we have at the moment between the genders. Is that men feel a lot of shame coming, and they're already so steeped in shame. They don't, they don't want more of it. So it's how do we motivate, how do we call men into action without doing it through shame, and doing it through purpose, and doing it through belonging, and doing it through connection.
Yeah.
And that's where sorry go. And that's where the vulnerability comes in. The absolute antithesis to shame is vulnerability, speaking our truths. And that's something that I'm very big on, is leading with vulnerability, because it invites that is what when we invite people in, our vulnerability invites people in.
Yeah. And I feel hopeful, Luke, because I know a lot of excellent men in my world who do great men's work, who meet with guys, whether they're walking on the beach each morning and swimming together, where they're holding groups, online spaces, circles, where they are beautiful men who are being like those elders to say, I'm going to lean in and I'm going to call this and I'm going to hold it. And this is, and like what you are doing as well. Like, I do have hope that we are at a time now where there is enough men stepping forward to be those guides for others to say, come join me. And this is what it can actually look like. And that fills me up, because I'm just like, I do have hope that we're going to get there. And, we see, you talked about role models before and what books could be, role models for you. And one of the big things I often talk to parents about is that especially our teens, they need role models. They need men that they can look up to that are good, wholesome men. And the same with young girls. They need empowered, embodied women who are like, this is what it is to have a strong boundary. And this is, what it is to own your power and all that kind of beautiful stuff. Like, we need those role models, and I think it's something that's been lacking in our society and culture for a really long time. Yeah.
And I would even go a step further in saying just good human role models. Like, there is, like, young boys need good, strong women as role models too, and young girls need good, strong men, strong, competent, resourceful humans.
Yes.
And that's. I think once we can, and I'm very big on this, is rising above, the genders and saying what makes a strong, competent human. And that is what's important, because I see so much of this, and it's just horribly toxic and just disgusting, rhetoric, is men trying to harbor or trying to gatekeep behaviors or values. It's gender superiority, it's gender essentialism, and so dumb. It's like the most. It's just like, why would a behavior or a value only be allowed to be embodied by men? It's the most ignorant take I come across, and I see it all the time. This is not, to be a good man, to be a good woman, you need to be a good human.
It's exactly right, because we box ourselves into, it should be this. And what if you're not that? What does that mean? You're not a good person?
Yes.
Or a good man or a good woman? Like, I actually think, I love what you're saying. It's about being a good human, and I really do hold that as well, is that we need more role models in general of people who are powerful and vulnerable and speaking their truth and owning their stories and all those really, really important pieces for this next generation to witness and see. Because I think, and again, when they see that in action, like you in the books, they're like, that exists, that's possible, that I could become that. But also we get to guide children around how to step forward into being that. And I think for me, I've done a lot of great things in this world. I've achieved a lot of things, but my greatest achievement by far is my 3 children, without doubt. And it dawned on me when they were young, I'm like, holy crap, who they're going to be in the world is based on me. And so I've got to get my shit together, because I'm like, what is it that I want them to be? Am I living that? It's a really good line in the sand of just like, well, what qualities do I want them to have, and what values do I want them to have? And do I want them to be risk takers? And do I want them to be vulnerable? And do I want them to be caring? Well, am I doing that? Because that's what they're looking at each day.
Yes.
So, that was my kind of wake up moment to be like, whoa, you need to do the work so that they have something to look towards. And I'm not saying, there's no perfect in it, but the key pieces that I wanted for them to live was really important for me to see if I was living.
Yes.
And I guess my question for you is, if you were to have, I'm presuming you don't have children.
No.
Okay.
But I deeply desire them.
Okay. Yes. All right. So if you are to become a father, what are the imprints that you hope that your children carry forward?
Yes, fantastic question, and something I think about all the time. And it's in what you said, and you said, it's not about being perfect. And I think, in fact, it is actually about being imperfect.
Yes.
My kids, knowing that like saying, kids, I've had a really bad day today, like, Dad, Dad made a mistake today.
Mm-hmm.
Dad did something wrong. Dad shouldn't have done this. Or, you know, like being able to show them, hey, I am so fallible. I am so imperfect. And then and being vulnerable in front of them. And, you know, that's what actually, and it's so funny because it's such a juxtaposition, because weakness and vulnerability, intimacy, that is actually what makes us strong.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are vulnerable and, you know, when you can stand in that and you say, here is all of me. Here's all of my flaws. Here's all of my mistakes. Here's all of the stupid things that I have done. No one can take you. No one can take your character from you when you embody it in its fullest. You know, it's when we lie about who we are, that's when we are weak, because if we lie about who we are and we pretend to be perfect, that's when we can actually, someone can take, you know, that away from us. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, so it's always, for me, it's, you know, being able to show my kids life is tough. We make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I'm learning this too, but I'm here. I'm here to support you. And I will always be, you know, I've created that safe home within myself. I'm going to help create that in yourself. Mm-hmm. But I want you to know that my home is always a safe place for you as well. Mm-hmm. You know, and being, and as a man and as a father, especially, I mean, hopefully I have both boys and girls, but especially to my boys, loving them, cuddling them, you know, holding them. That is something that I cannot wait to do, even when they're 15, when they're 20, when they're 50, you know, cuddling them and kissing them and telling them that I love them, you know.
I feel really teary hearing you say that, because I'm thinking about my husband and my son, and Mike has done that with Kai from the moment he was born. And Kai's like, you know, this big 6'2" massive unit. They kiss and cuddle every day.
Yeah.
They wrestle sometimes. They are still deeply, deeply affectionate, because you're so right. It's deeply needed, you know, those places as well. Wow, those kids are gonna have chosen very well, mate. Like, you know, when that little spirit comes down, they'll all be fighting to get in there to have you as their dad.
I hope so.
Just to kind of finish up, I just want to come back to the books for a minute, and this might be a question that you cannot answer. It's a pretty, you know, I'm just going to throw it out there. Do you have a favorite book? It's probably like asking someone to choose their favorite child. Do you have a favorite book, or, as you said, a role model or a character that is like, that's my jam?
Yeah. Okay. This is there's always two books that come to mind whenever people ask this of me. And there's The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett, which I read when I was 13 for the very first time. And there's a character in that book called Alan Bales. And Alan Bales was who I always wanted to be growing up. Okay. Like, that was the person I wanted to be. But so they're both these books are epic fantasy. So yeah, The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett, and then Magician by Raymond E. Feist. And Magician was the very first fantasy book I read after I got out of rehab. And before going into rehab during my addiction, reading actually fell out of my life because I was so consumed by my addiction. And Magician was the very first fantasy book I read after I came out of rehab, and it reignited that magical place within me and allowed me to reconnect with it. It gave me the pathway home to myself, that book. And it's a fantastic book. You know, the story is incredible in and of itself, but those two books hold such a beautiful, sacred place within my soul, because they mean so much to me. They mean the world to me, and the characters and the stories within them just have such profound meaning within my life.
I love that so much, because what you're saying is it's the impact on your life at the time of what that means. Like, I'm just thinking as you say that, I reckon, I mean, I've read many books and I love reading too, but I reckon there was a book I read by Shirley MacLaine. I don't even know if you know who she was, but she was like it was a book I read maybe when I was like 12 or 13. It was kind of a spiritual book. It like opened up a whole other world for me. I remember reading that as opening a portal into there's another way of being here, that is about humans. And as you're talking about that, I'm like, that book had such a profound impact on my life because it was about we're more than just this. Yes. And that's what I love about books at certain phases in your life, what they can crack open in you. It is just, it's medicine, isn't it?
It's possibility. It's dreams.
Yeah.
It's dreams. It is dreams.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So you're writing a book at the moment, yes?
I am.
How's that going for you?
Amazing.
Oh, good.
So the second draft is currently with my publisher right now. I'm hoping to get feedback this week, actually, and it is planned to publish in May 2027. Still 12 months away.
Yeah.
But it's been incredible. It's the most rewarding and hard, like the most rewarding and hard thing that I've ever been through in my life. But I cannot tell you how deeply excited and how much joy I already feel to share this story with the world, because I love this so much and I want to share that love and that joy with so many more people. And I just, I don't want to be like arrogant or anything like that, but I really, really believe that people will connect with it and enjoy it.
I feel like you've been made for this moment. You've had a lifetime of dreaming and creativity and fantasy to bring you to this moment, which I love. And I love seeing you light up when you talk about how great it is. I have written 2 books. They were torturous experiences. Not torturous, that's too much. Writing is not something that comes as easily to me, so it is more of a struggle. So when I hear people and authors and writers go, "Oh my God, it's amazing," I'm just like, "Oh, okay." I'm envious at what that looks like. So that's beautiful to hear.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, writing is both all I want to do and the one thing that I never want to have to do again.
I hear you. I totally hear you. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Well, I have no doubt it's going to be a huge success. I mean, I just feel, even as I said that before, it's like your whole life's led you to this point of all that beautiful creativity and dreaming. I love that we're going to come back to dreaming, has brought you to this moment. And I think if ever there's... Pardon? It's a bookend. Yes.
We'll bookend the pod. Start with dreaming, end with dreaming.
Yeah. And I think if there was ever a testament to dreaming, then it's this, isn't there? Of like, where can our life end up? I mean, your story, even of what you've shared, is the journey, right, of that book, of where you began, and then the challenge and the hero's journey you have to go through, and then the healing, and then finding your way back. It was already written, wasn't it, on some level?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Written in the stars.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, to finish off, what do you have going on, Luke, that you would love people to know about? Here's your plug. What would you like people to know?
I don't want people to know anything. I'm obviously writing my book and doing my podcast, but my work is very deeply meaningful to me, and people don't need to know about that. If it reaches them and it touches them, it'll definitely find them. So
okay. So all right. Well, we'll have your handles anyway in the show notes. So at Luke Reads. And what's your podcast called again?
It's called In the Good Books.
In the Good Books. Beautiful, great title. So check that out if you want to hear more of Luke. Luke, I just feel like it's been an incredible privilege to sit here with you for the hour. I have felt moved to tears many times, just purely because of your willingness to stand in the shadow and share about who you are. I feel really emotional now even saying this. It really gives me hope in humans. When I hear about these stories or challenges that people have moved through and their willingness to turn towards it, to own who they are, to lean into that repair, and then to kind of step towards the future, to show others what is possible. It always brings me back to that we're going to be okay on this planet. So I really want to thank you for just sharing your journey so vulnerably and openly. I want to thank you for being a beautiful role model for all people, boys and girls, coming forward to be a very, very good human. And, as you said in the beginning, you know what you're here for is to figure out how to be a human. And I think you're doing a really, really good job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Lael. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I've loved this conversation. It's, I always find it's so enriching to me to be able to have these types of conversations. I really enjoy them. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing this time with me. You can find my book, Own Your Story, at bookshops or listen to the audiobook on Audible. I even read it myself. You can stay connected with Humans Being on Instagram, Facebook or YouTube. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, question or contemplation. And visit my website, laelstone.com.au, where you'll find lots of great resources and courses for you to explore. This podcast is produced by Nigel Carboon, recorded by the crew at We Make Online Videos, designed by Mike Gall, and our original music is created by Josh Reed. Humans Being is produced on the lands of the Bunurong and Wadawurrung people. We pay respect to their unique and diverse cultures and to elders past, present and future. Until next time, stay connected and don't forget to be human.